Okay. The future of food. So, like most things, I look at everything quite literally. So, when I was presented with the topic of future of food, I thought I was going to talk about like a future food. So, basically, I chose my topic, and I actually knew nothing about it. So, I don't know if that's a foolhardy thing at all, or just insanity. But tends to be how I make most of my decisions. I don't really think about them that much. So I chose a topic which is quite fascinating, or I found that it's actually quite fascinating, and it's something that I actually absolutely wanted to hate, and I thought I was gonna get up here and talk about how much I hate this product, but however, through the course of learning about it, it makes it hard to hate it, but I still hate it. But anyway, it's a thing called Soylent, and it's a relatively new product that's come onto the market in the last sort of three years, I think it is. So basically, it is a product where you think perhaps this is the future of food, and it's a very scary thought when you start to analyze what exactly that could be. So first of all, does anyone know what it is? It's gross, right? It's people. Well, it's not people. But there's a bit of a misnomer about where the name came from. It's not from the Charlton Heston film called Soylent Green, where they were eating a green biscuit, and at the end, Charlton Heston, in a way only Charlton Heston could do, proclaims that it's made of people. Anyway, that was Charlton Heston. So the name actually comes from where a lot of ideas on modern life come from, and it's science fiction. So it's based. The name comes from a story that was written in the 1970s, and basically it's a post-apocalyptic story, and they try to come up with a product that would feed an undernourished and overpopulated world. So they came up with a product which was a mixture of soy and lentils and pureed them together, and they got Soylent. But that's not what it is in the real world. So basically, to tell you a little story about it, if you don't 100% know what I'm talking about, and from what I gather, most of you don't, is that there was a young engineer. He was running a tech startup in San Francisco. He'd been given $170,000, and his idea was a bit shit. It wasn't really working, and he was running out of money. So him and the other people in the incubator that were thinking about these ideas started to look at how can we save money. And they looked at what breakdown of their costs and where it was all going. And they found that food was their largest cost. So he was living off, at this point, I think he says he was living off frozen quesadillas and vitamin C tablets to stave off scurvy. And he decided, like, this is not great. I'm running out of money. I'm living off a really quite terrible diet. What can I do about this? So he decided to start researching basically what it took to survive as a human, and what goes into your body and what you need as a fuel source. And he came up with the idea that our food systems in general are too complex, too expensive, and far too fragile. And it's actually something that's really, really hard to argue against. And this is why I have this love-hate relationship with this product, is that I hate everything, the ethos of it and everything that it's all about, but the ideas behind and the rationalization are really hard to argue with. So that's sort of why I hate it, but I don't. Anyway, he's quoted as saying, when he started to think about food, you need amino acids and lipids, and you don't actually need milk. You need carbohydrates, but you don't actually need bread. You eat fruit and vegetables, and they're a great delivery method for vitamins, but they're mostly water. So he was looking at going, everything is incredibly inefficient in our food systems. So he started looking at the FDA regulations and the dietary guidelines and what it took to eat and survive and be healthy. And he started to order a whole bunch of powders off the internet. And his first attempt at this, he just bought all these powders, he pureed it in a blender with some water and drank it. And he's since been living off this, essentially it's a sludge, for a year, at least a year, his sole food source, which is quite amazing to think of, actually. Right, where was I at? And so well, so I was thinking about this, and it's a horrible, horrible idea that you could live off a sludge, and you're losing all the sort of pleasure, like Phil talked about. Life is pleasure, and why would you want to abandon a certain amount of pleasure? But that's not. Then he rationalizes it again, and he says he wants to divide his eating between utility, so surviving, and pleasure. So still going out and enjoying meals and socializing was still an inherent part of his life. But what we struggle to understand, because we live in a sort of subculture of food pleasure, is that there's a lot of people in the world that eating and dining out isn't the way of life, and they just want sustenance. They want a fuel source, and they would prefer to have free time rather than be going to a grocery store and buying groceries and unpacking groceries and cutting up and washing fruit and vegetables and cooking meat. And this was all very time-consuming products. So for a high percentage of the population, it's actually quite an interesting idea, and one that a lot of people strangely want to pursue. And if you go to the Soylent website, they have an online forum, and there's people all around the world saying, when are you going to bring this product to my country? I really want it. And it's quite confronting to read all these things when my whole life is based around eating and food and beautiful ingredients. So anyway, I think I'm sort of waffling a little bit at this point. Anyway, so when this product first came out, initially launched, it was massive criticism of it, and everyone dismissed it and said it was faddish and it wasn't going to survive. But 3 years later, the orders are flowing in, and the company's growing, and it's making the guy who created it quite rich. And now he's come up with what he calls Soylent 2.0. So he has all these weird tech jokes that I don't really understand. But anyway, so basically Soylent 2.0, to paraphrase the release paperwork for it: soy protein for amino acid, algal oil for lipids and essential fatty acids, isomaltulose from beetroots, and vitamins and minerals. It is 37 grams of carbohydrates, it's 21 grams of fats, and it's 20 grams of protein. It won't spoil, it's shelf stable, it's satisfying to drink, it's nut-free, lactose-free, vegan, and FDA approved. So it's ticking a lot of boxes for a lot of people. However, it's not gluten-free, it's not organic, and it's 100% not free of GMO products. So you're seeing where there's this love-hate thing here. It's supplied in a recyclable packaging. It doesn't require refrigeration, so it doesn't take power to store it. It's environmentally low impact. So that gets to this point. We're talking about sustainability, and we're all up here saying everything's got to be sustainable, like sustainability, sustainability, sustainability. Now, if we were really, really, really dedicated towards sustainability, we'd actually be forcing people to adopt this product, because it's one of probably the most purely sustainable products that you can ever imagine. It doesn't take a lot to produce it, but it can provide the world with quite a lot of sustenance. And my little environmental heart has a really hard time arguing against that, because you want the world to be a beautiful place, and you want your children and your children's children to survive in a world which we're pulling apart. And there's this potential ingredient which I find horrific could provide that, and it's quite a confronting issue. And the whole idea of having a product which we could solely live on is not a new idea at all. Actually, the Greek gods gained eternal life from eating ambrosia. The Jetsons had a pill. They ate a pill, that was it. And I can't imagine who grew up watching the Jetsons who didn't imagine how amazing it would be to have a pill, and it was everything that you could possibly eat. And now I find that, well, most of you are looking at me like this is a horrific idea, but it was an amazing idea at the time. The only thing is that eventually I was sitting here, and I actually didn't know what I was going to talk about up until about a couple of hours ago. In general, I had a rough idea of what I was going to do, and I went back at about 1 o'clock to write this in the hotel. And I was thinking about how can I talk about how I hate this product. And basically, if we continue to go the path we are in making this kind of product more, something that people want to have, there's going to be an immensely important and destructive shift in the entire world's eating habits. Potentially food itself could become, the future of food could be based on a pure luxury status symbol. You could have a whole underclass of people just sustaining themselves by drinking a drink of sludge, but it's keeping them alive and they're working and contributing to society. And you could have a rich overclass that actually gets to eat real food. And basically, I think the biggest thing, and we need to sort of speak about this because it's something that could potentially happen, is that we could potentially lose the cultural apprenticeship that mealtimes provide us. The future of food is much more than just sustenance. It's much more than just nutrition. It's much more than the environment. It's the building blocks of which life and culture are based upon. Mealtimes, they reinforce cultural and moral values through the discourse that you have over the table. You talk to your children and you enforce a way of eating upon them, and that then in turn changes the way that they perceive life, and it's a continual cycle. So food in general, and it's a marker of all the important events and times of our lives. It's weddings, it's first dates, it's anniversaries, it's celebrations, it's birthdays, and it's also death. The first thing that we do after a funeral, generally speaking, and particularly, I don't know, for every culture, but the first thing you do, what's the first thing you do after you bury a loved one? You go back to a house and you eat together. So I'm not an environmental scientist. I'm not a dietitian. And I don't pretend to have any expertise in this field whatsoever. But I do think we need to worry about this important rise of a product called Soylent, and perhaps what it could be the wider marker of, and that potentially could be that currently we need to maybe think about inviting technology into our agriculture. We need to start at looking at making things potentially more efficient and produced in a better way. We need to encourage people to perhaps abandon their addiction to pre-processed, unseasonal, and we need to get this conversation started. That food isn't just sustenance. There's a social benefit to sitting around a table, enjoying a meal, talking about ideas and discussing. I mean, how many great ideas have probably been born over an average meal, and it's something that's incredibly important. I think we really need to start to realize and talk about and vocalize is that food is not just nourishment. It's the punctuation marks of which life itself revolves around. And we need to allow food to not just be an environmental problem, and it shouldn't be reduced to mere nutrition, just in the same way that sex is not just reproduction. To summarize, basically, I wanted to talk about Soylent just to illustrate that potentially sustainability isn't the only repercussion that we're facing in our current state of poor industrialized food systems, and that perhaps we're risking much, much, much more than just the loss of a fish species. And unless we begin to address the way that food is produced and distributed and wasted, potentially products like Soylent may become increasingly more attractive to a wider population. And there's the potential that eventually, and it's a very real possibility, that we may lose the cultural markers which really provide us with our personalities. Anyway. So basically, I'm not trying to offer a solution, and I'm not saying that is even the way forward. But basically, I just wanted to start a discussion and put it out there that potentially, among the wider audience of the world, that there is a real problem with our food systems, and we need to actually look at how we're going to address these problems before a product like Soylent really takes hold and becomes a very common ingredient.